All right, let's do the last question type, our question 2, which is the create a class question. And again, the idea here is that I will give you some console program that uses a class you've never seen before. Can you write the class? Let's scroll down and let's look at this last problem. All right, it says everyone is hooked on the silly new addictive iPhone app, Silly Fun Time Game. And you have a little hero who's trying to complete levels. If you get a high enough score, you can complete the level and move on, and maybe earn some coins. Here's my console program. And look, I'm writing a class that is called Game Status. It looks like that keeps track of the hero's level and their coins. Just by looking at this, I can see some of the methods of the Game Status class. Look, here's one called Play Current Level. Here's one called Get Current Level, and here's one called Get Coins. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm not even going to read any of the stuff to start. So let's go here. Remember, to make a class, you're normally given the header, but I will make you type it here. If you forgot, couldn't you actually go look up in question 1 to find where this is? Look, this is what it looks like. Let's type here, public class game status. And let's start with step 0. Isn't step 0 that we need to figure out the method signatures from this little console program? Sweet. So we always start with the constructor. We have public game status. Remember, the constructor has no return type. And in this case, our constructor actually takes no parameters. Let's do public, what's the return type of play current level? It should be void. It's on a line by itself. So let's do public void play current level. And it looks like it takes one parameter. That looks like it's going to be an int. Now the question is, what does this parameter mean? Because I do have to give it a name. And this might be where it's a good idea to start kind of looking down in some of these bullet points. And I actually do see, once I hit this second bullet point here, the parameter to play current level represents the score the hero achieved in attempting to complete that level. It says, note that the units of score are points, not coins, two separate things. So I'm going to do int score here. All right, we've got one of the methods here. I think there's 2 more. We've got get current level. What's probably the return type of get current level? I would guess it's probably an int. You can't really be on level 2.5, at least in most games. And the last one, which I think was public int get coins. Again, you can't really have half a coin. And I think those are the 3 methods and the constructor that we need to write. So I believe our step 0 is done. Now for step 1. And again, step 1 often ends up being the trickiest step out of all of them. What does this game status class need to keep track of? What private instance variables do I need? Didn't it say actually up here that the game status class is going to keep track of the hero's level and coins? And there is sometimes a little hint into what your private instance variables should be. It's not always exact, and sometimes you'll need more than this, but it looks like I have a method called get current level, which means at some point I need to be able to say what the current level is. And I have a method called get coins, so I need to be able to say how many coins I have. So at the very least, don't I need to store that information in some way in my class? So let's do this. Let's do private int coins and private int level. All right, that's step 1. Now for step 2, we can fill in all of our methods using these private instance variables. As always, let's start with our constructor. What's the job of the constructor? I have to initialize my private instance variables, which means, gosh darn it, I better have coins equals something and level equals something. At the very start of the game, it actually says here, I start at level 1 with no coins. Haha, level 1. Might have tripped you up with that. There we go. Let's skip over play current level just because it's kind of the most complicated one. Get current level, what's this going to do? Remember, I don't have void here, so what's that special word that I need to have in this method is return, and what am I returning is the level. And same thing down here, I have an int here, so I need a return, and what I'm returning is the coins. All right, now there's a lot of rules with how I play through the levels, so let's look at this. Each level has a target score equal to 100 times the level number. The hero must score more points than this target score to complete the level and move on. So that's one option, is the hero can complete the level and move on. The hero earns coins if, on any level, she achieves a score more than twice the target score. For example, if the hero's on level 3 and gets a score of 650, twice the target score would be 600. So I would earn 50 coins since that's the difference. And if the hero scores exactly 0 points, she loses all of her coins that she may have already earned. So kind of 4 things that can happen. The hero can lose all of her coins. The hero can not pass a level, in which case I don't really need to do anything. The hero can pass a level but not really score any coins, and the hero can pass a level and score coins. Let's start with the one that I think is actually the most straightforward, which is, what do I do if I get exactly 0 points? Won't this require an if statement? Let's do if score equals 0. What do I want to do? I want to set my number of coins equal to 0. Now, if I get to this else here, what does that mean? Is I scored at least 1 point. There's 3 different scenarios here. Either I passed the level and got coins, or I didn't pass the level. Let's check and see if I passed the level. Let's do if score is greater than, isn't it level times 100 is that cutoff score? What do I want to do if this is the case? Well, what happens? Doesn't my level go up by 1 because I move on to the next level? Couldn't I also potentially earn some coins? When do I do that? It's actually when my score is more than 2 times the target. So how can I check that? If score is greater than level times 200, wouldn't that mean that what should happen is my coins should increase by the difference between this amount and the score that I got, or actually the opposite way, by the difference between my score and this amount? So let's do this. Score minus level times 200. Now this looks pretty good, but I've actually intentionally made one mistake here because I want to talk a little bit about the nuance of how you order your lines of code. Let's think about how this is happening. Let's say let's use the scenario that they used actually here. If I'm on level 3 and I get a score of 650, let's see what happens. Would I make it into this if statement? No, I'd go into the else. Would I make it into this one? Yeah, 650 is greater than 3 times 100, so I would. What's going to happen here is that my level will go up from 3 to 4. Now, my score is still 650. Is 650 greater than 4 times 200? No, it's actually not. And what's the issue that's happening here is I'm kind of advancing on to the next level before I see if I got any coins for that level. So the order here is not quite right. All I need to do is take this line of code and actually move it to be after that if statement here. And I think this will solve my problems. So let's just double check those 4 cases that we talked about. If my score is 0, my coins are 0. Great, that's all that's going to happen. If my score is not 0, but it's greater than the target, that means I passed the level. So I'm going to go into here. If I didn't go inside this if statement, won't it just skip this and then actually be done? So if I get a score that's not 0 but not good enough to pass the level, I actually just stay on this level. That's exactly what I want to happen. Then I check to see, did I earn any coins based on the cutoff for this level? Then I increase my levels. So there we go. Clearly, a lot of the more critical thinking part of this happened inside this method. The rest of making this class was more straightforward for sure than this part here. That was the whole test. If you've watched all 3 of these videos, you should feel really familiar with what your test is going to look like. This is pretty on par with the difficulty that you may see. So what should you do now if you're still trying to prepare? Well, there's 2 other tests that are posted for you on Schoology. I would definitely recommend sitting down and working through all of those. This is the kind of class where to study for a test or for the AP exam at the end of the year, you can't just sit down and look at solutions. You have to go through the critical thinking step of training your brain to think in the correct way. You can't just look at something and say, oh yeah, it looks like I would be able to do that. You have to actually do it. Get the muscle memory going so that when you sit down for the test, it actually feels like it's second nature. Remember that the way that both me and the AP will grade your test is, if it works, you get full credit. I like to say, if it works, it works. And that's really all you care about on the test. A lot of times when I grade your projects, I'm grading also based on your decomposition and your style. But on the test, it actually doesn't matter. Assuming you write code that does the intended purpose, it can be absolutely disgusting. And if it works, and you get full credit. Of course, you shouldn't try to be fancy. Don't try to show off. Do each problem in the most straightforward way. If you're trying to show off, it's pretty likely that you're accidentally going to screw something up and then lose points by doing that. Hopefully you're feeling pretty good going into these 3 different types of problems, but there are lots more practice where these came from.